Hello, my dear friends. Hello, my dear listeners. How are you all? So, today, here we are with the last part of the story The Four Swindlers. This story is taken from Bengal Fairy Tales, written by Francis Bradley Bird. This book was illustrated by Abanindranath Thakur and it was first published in the year 1920. Till now, we came to know that finally the deceptive astrologer or the one of the friends in the disguise of astrologer have announced that the next victim is going to be the king. So what happened next? So let's proceed. The sensation that prevailed after this announcement can be better imagined than described, and the whole city was in great consternation. The police force was augmented by recruits from the Mofussil, mercenaries from all over the kingdom within a day's march were enrolled, and every house in the city sent out its volunteers. The king, at sunset, fully escorted patrolled the streets on horseback, and it seemed as if every door was shut against intruders. Galloping far and near, the king on one of his rides towards the outskirts of the city found a jogi absorbed in his meditations with a fire burning before him. The king was inspired with veneration for the yogi's sanctity and bowed low to him, informing him of his troubles and begging him to frustrate the evil purposes of his enemies. The yogi expressed great sympathy and offered to go to the palace and cast a spell round it so as to make it impervious to any attack. The king said that that was out of the question, for he had left word that nobody should be permitted to approach the palace. At that, the jogi appeared to give up the project, but the king, after musing within himself, came to a decision on the matter. He said that the religious man might put on the royal dress and riding on the royal horse might reach the palace unopposed. The plan seemed feasible, but another difficulty stood in the way. The jogi said that the fire burning before him was sacrificial, and that it was necessary that it should be preserved. The king, however, volunteered to attend to it, and the two men thereupon exchanged clothes. The king then sat down by the fire to replenish it while the ascetic rode to the palace. The jogi was no other than the prince of the foreign kingdom, bent on practicing his ruse, and on he sped until, entering the palace, he hastened to the queen and talked to her so cleverly that no suspicion as to his identity entered her mind. He pretended a great deal of apprehension and induced her to deliver into his hands all the most precious gems and jewels in her custody. This done, he rode away, though not to the place where he had left the king, but to his lodgings. The poor king waited for the jogi's return for many hours, and when he could no longer command his patience, he wearily walked to the gate of the palace. On attempting to get in, however, he was repulsed by the police. On his becoming imperious, they laughed at him and then thrashed him so that he lay insensible during the remaining hours of the night. But when the sun rose above the horizon, some of the sentinels recognized him and with aching hearts removed him to his bed, where it took him some considerable time to recover. Later in the day, he attended the court and with tears narrated his experiences of the past night. The false astrologer was present, but this time the courtiers suspected him. They rightly thought that he must be an accomplice of the robbers, and one of them went so far throughout innuendos regarding his complicity and to advise his instant dismissal from the court after he had been severely chastised. The object of this treatment, without making any protest, went away, and when he made his friends, they concocted a plan for the punishment of the courtier. What that plan was, we shall see later. The court rose and people went to their own homes in no variable humor. They were all filled with suspense. Nobody knew who was to be the next victim. The security offered by the presence of the police was no security at all, and most of the citizens thought of leaving their homes for some other country. Human succor could no longer be relied upon, and appeal was made to the gods for the removal of the cars. The king resigned himself to the hands of fate, and after attending the special devotional services that were held, shout his bid. Let us now divert our attention to the four men who had caused him and his people so much trouble. With a basket of sweetmeats, they knocked at the gate of the courtier who had that morning insulted one of them. The owner of the house, unwilling to receive strangers at so late an hour, did not open the gate but asked from inside who his visitors were. To this they replied that they were bearers of presents from the king. The poor man's gullibility got the better of his judgment, and half opening the gate, he thrust forth his right hand to receive the gift. But alas, that hand would never more be used, for the greater part of it was chopped off, and the courtier rolled on the ground in great agony. His assailants vanished before his shrieks could be heard by his people, and hurriedly proceeded towards that side of the palace where the king's bedroom stood. Through its open window, they thrust the courtier's hand tied to a pole so that it touched the king's head. The king instantly jumped up, cut at it with the sword lying beside him, and exulted greatly at the idea of having dismembered one of those who had so long been his pastes, and having thus found a clue to the discovery of the whole gang. The next morning, the king got up and instructed the Kotal to send his men round to find out a man whose right hand had been cut off. But the man had not far to go, for the unfortunate courtier was found coming to the palace with his mutilated wrist hidden in a bandage slung round his neck. This at once aroused suspicion in their minds, and taking off the bandage, they saw that the hand was missing and at once jumped to the conclusion that the man they wanted was before them. They laid him bound to the king, and the account he gave of the night's adventure not being believed, he was sentenced to be tortured until he named his accomplices, and finally, if he did not confess, to be executed. The work of torture was about to commence when the four young men, the cause of his misfortune, came to the court dressed according to their rank and made a clean breast of everything. They had brought with them all their spoils, and they laid them at the king's feet with many apologies for the trouble they had caused. The king, too generous and humorous not to understand their motives, embraced them and sent them away with many presents, giving the hand of his daughter to the prince. The Kotal and the merchant also had marriageable daughters, and this they gave to the two young men whose fathers in their own country were of the same rank as themselves. The prime minister had a young maiden niece whom he married to him who had once impersonated his son in law. A veil was drawn over the past, and the four friends with their wives returned safely to their own country, not forgetting to make ample amends to the confectioner and the boatman for the deception they had practiced upon them. So, my dear listeners, today here is the end of the story, and from this story, one thing I have only concluded that in my mind, that we have to be vigilant, otherwise somebody will, um, if we are good, if we are very simple person, that is good for our own soul, but we should have some guard with us, otherwise anyone can rob us. So be cautious. So with this notation, I am today saying ta-da.